everyone. My name is Aislin Kriukelis, or Aislin O'Connor as I was when I was at Hallows. I'm now working as a journalist and presenter at Channel 9, and I'm really honoured to have been asked to be your MC here this morning for this Past Pupils Association International Women's Day breakfast. Of course, the purpose of the Past Pupils Association is to keep everyone connected, something which is so much easier said than done during a pandemic. So it's so wonderful to see so many of you here, and such a mixture of past pupils here. I myself graduated in 2002. I've already spotted one of my O2 buddies here. I'm not sure if anyone else is here, but I'll have a work my way around the room and hopefully see anyone else who's here. I'm also lucky enough to have my mum here, my sister, my mother-in-law, my sisters-in-law, my auntie, my cousins, some really good family friends. So we have plenty of strong AHS spirit in our family, which is lovely. Can I now introduce our special guests, including Jill Stockwell, who graduated from Hallows in 1986. Jill is a social anthropologist with rich experience working in the fields of transitional justice, humanitarian diplomacy and community development. From Geneva to Cyprus, Sri Lanka to Argentina, Jill's work has led her to many parts of the world. She is currently Transformation Manager and Deputy Head of the Central Tracing Agency at the International Committee of the Red Cross. Jill is married with 2 children, a 9-year-old son, Billy Sundance, and a 15-year-old daughter, Bonnie, who's currently a Year 10 student at Hallows. Welcome, Jill. Dorcas Tuyishimere, who graduated in your Hallows class of 2017, making all of us feel a little old, I think. Dorcas was born in Rwanda, and when she was just 4 years old, her mum fled with her to Uganda. Her 4 brothers gradually joined them, and in 2009, the family arrived in Australia as refugees. When she arrived here as a 9-year-old, Dorcas didn't speak any English or know about Australian cultural practices, but with determination, she learned. Dorcas is now in her 4th year, studying a Bachelor of Nursing and Behavioural Science at QUT. Welcome, Dorcas. So we are going to have a conversation, as I said, about these ladies' experiences and also about International Women's Day for this year. Dorcas, I'll start with you. Can you tell us about what you remember about your childhood?
I don't remember much of what happened in Rwanda. But most of it, like, I just remember like playing around with kids. My earliest memories in Rwanda was just my mother moving me to Uganda.
How did that happen, Dorcas? What was that like?
I don't really know, like, you know, like the deep meanings or reasons why we were leaving, but I just remember like one night just like not having much and just saying bye to like my siblings and then having to leave, and I wasn't really told what was going on, and I think it was just my mother trying to like not stress me out or anything, but I really didn't know where I was going or if I was going to see anyone again, so yeah.
And what happened when you arrived in Uganda? What was that like?
It was pretty scary. I didn't really know the culture there either. And because it was just me and my mum, like I was really more worried for my mum because she had to find a way to like make a living there because like in Rwanda it was mostly like my dad that was working and she would just be at home. So because the streets of Uganda were like very difficult to live in, I was more worried about her safety. And yeah, that's just something like really forced me to be like more careful about the environment I was in. So it was pretty like challenging and scary, my first initial reactions. Yeah.
How long was it just you and your mother for? How did the rest of the family then join you?
I don't know, maybe like a couple of months. So I was there with I went with my mum just on a bus, like we didn't have anything other than her having like some important documents. And later on my brothers came, but they came with like maybe an uncle from Rwanda. And we had to live like very discreetly because we couldn't like move together as a family or it looked suspicious or it looked like we were really like trying to leave. So we had to come to Uganda like separately. So it was like my oldest, my youngest the middle children came like later on, and they had to be all dressed in like rugged clothes to look like they were, you know, villagers or like passing by, so it didn't look too suspicious that we're leaving the country. Yeah.
And then what about the journey to Australia? Can you tell us how that happened and what you remember about first arriving here?
Arriving in Australia, so same thing, I wasn't really told what was happening. Like, I just remember like mum being like, oh, we're leaving out, like we're leaving the country, and I was like, okay. So I didn't really have time to say goodbye to my friends. Yeah, I think the whole like having to be discreet came into play a lot. But I was like very confused. I had to go in an aeroplane. Like that was really new to me. Like these are just things I'd only seen in like movies, you know. So that was really rough. But yeah, when I got to Australia, like everything was so different. Like there were a lot of buildings. The people looked different. I'd never seen blonde white people. Like it was so new to me. Like but everyone was so friendly. Like and in your business in a very helpful way. Like I remember this little kid like offering me some grapes, and I was like, oh, stop it, this is nice. I didn't say that because I didn't know the language. But yeah, like I don't know. I really liked. I was excited about the culture and how how friendly everyone was. Yeah.
Just on the language,
Yeah.
what was that like learning English? How hard was it and how long did it take?
It was really hard. I don't know. I think because I was younger, like it came about easier. But I remember like at school, I didn't speak for a whole year because I was so nervous and anxious about like if I was conducting myself correctly or if I was saying words in the right context. And I don't know, I have this anxiety about being embarrassed. So yeah, it took me a long time to actually properly speak English. But I spent most of my time just like, you know, watching Neighbours on TV. Yeah, still watch it. I love it. Went a bit crazy. Went a bit crazy. But yeah, read some books, some Roald Dahl, Matilda, you know, and I got a lot of like ESL support at school. But yeah, I didn't start speaking until like my second year in Australia. Like, that's when I really started speaking English. Yeah.
It's very impressive. And Jill, I will bring you in here. Of course, you've spent a lot of time yourself in Africa through your work with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Can you tell us about your role, what it is you do?
Actually, I had culture shock myself when I went to Africa, so you're not alone there, it goes both ways. But yes, actually my first mission with the International Committee of the Red Cross, or the ICRC, which is how it's also called, was in the Republic of Congo in Africa. And I remember that was in 1999, and it was full conflict. And I remember arriving on a boat, a putt-putt boat, that brought me across from the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Republic of Congo. And I remember arriving on the beach thinking, I'm in the wrong place. I shouldn't be here. And then when I talked to the head of the delegation at the time, because I'd been told through my training, ask what the escape plan is. And I asked her, so what's our escape plan if something goes wrong? And she said, the putt-putt boat. I want to go home. But also it was really an eye-opener for me there. My job involved every Friday night going to the central train station to welcome the train that was coming in from the jungle, and it would be full of civilians fleeing violence as well as rebel groups that were surrendering. And I would be at this train station at 8 p.m. With my Red Cross bib on as my only protection. And about a couple of minutes before the train would arrive, gangs of military would arrive, and they'd all get into position. And I was the only non-white white person there, and I remember the only person from an international organisation, again thinking, I shouldn't be here. And then when the train would arrive, streams of civilians would come off the train and come and approach me and tell me about the fact that, you know, the women surrounded by their children would tell me they'd been raped, they wanted the after warning pill, that their husband had been killed. And I remember it really struck me at that time how devastating it is that women have to show huge resilience to actually care for their children and carry on in life because of war, because it rips people apart. And I suppose, you know, listening to Dorcas and the fact that she went through a separation with her family for a while, this is a story that has, to an extent, a happy ending, where you were able to be reunited with your family. But it's very rare that I would see a happy ending in my work, because people have died or people go missing. And this was the other thing that, you know, it's probably a harsh thing to say. It's really terrible when we lose someone. The grief is unbearable. But I think it's even more unfathomable to think about if you have a missing loved one. It's the uncertainty that accompanies that, about not knowing if they're alive or if they're dead. When will I ever see them again? What was the last thing they said to me? What was my daughter wearing before she went missing? Does my son have enough to eat? These are the sorts of preoccupations that actually make life, when you have a missing loved one, quite unbearable. And I think this idea that kind of started for me in Africa, I ended up really studying it as I went on. It fascinated me, the idea of disappearance, that people could be there one day and then not there the next. The fact that within a family, they're psychically present all the time, but they're physically absent, and how does that affect families? So I studied that as my PhD, and it's really set the trajectory for my life today. And I think I really found out more about how important the role is that women play in remembering the past violence when I went to Kosovo the year after I finished in the Republic of Congo in 2000. And I used to go into villages to document the human rights abuses that had happened. And I remember being seated around and women with huge amounts of children all around them telling me about the stories about trucks of military had come in and taken away their husbands, and that was the last that they saw of them. And this is what's termed today disappearance, which is actually a state-sponsored action where people are just taken off the streets and could be held in detention, incommunicado, never seen of again. But what happens is that people are left, families are left not knowing, are they alive or are they dead? And when I was watching these women tell their stories with their children listening, the important role that women play in transmitting the memory of this violence really was impressed upon me. The role that they play in the intergenerational transmission of these memories that actually sets a very unofficial history. Usually it's men that set the historical record. History throughout the time has been written by men. But it's women that carry the unofficial history of this violence with them, and this is what gets transferred to the children and to societies, and actually has a very big impact on transitional and peace processes within countries. So I think that's probably how I ended up today where I am with the Central Tracing Agency at the ICRC. And Hallows is celebrating 160 years. Well, the Central Tracing Agency this year is celebrating 150 years. And it first started by a Swiss man called Henri Dunant, who was in a battlefield, the Battle of Solferino, and he saw a dying soldier on the field and realised that his family did not know what had happened to him. And so there and then he decided, I'm going to make sure that I take back the information about who this person is and transmit that to the family. And that was the start of the work of the Central Tracing Agency, which was a huge powerhouse in World War I and World War II, where it processed, I think it's about 36 million index cards of 22 million prisoners of war during World War II, which is all housed in the museum in Geneva, and it's part of the UNESCO Memory of the World Register. But I think it's probably one of the deepest wounds of war, and it's not acknowledged and it's not seen. And we have people who go through this that underestimate as well, I think, particularly governments, that it has such a big impact on an individual level, on a family level, and on a societal level. And so part of my work today is to really advocate on behalf of all those who are looking for their loved ones and who experience separation, and making sure that the Central Tracing Agency, which is about reconnecting families, reuniting them whether they're alive or whether they're dead with their families, and transforming it into the digital age. So that's what I'm up to today.
Dorcas, can you tell us how you ended up being a student at AHS?
Yeah, I didn't really know all Hallows existed. I didn't know the school because where I was on the south side, and I hadn't been to the city much. But Lisa's a Ganto, hi. So she helped me with the process of enrolling in here. So all Hallows actually they sponsored my education, so I was very fortunate to come here. Yeah, that's how it happened.
What sort of memories do you have of your time in high school?
There's a lot of memories. I don't know. I remember the first time I started here. I just remember going into, because in primary school I was very anxious. So in high school I just wanted to be a lot more confident and try to make friends. But yeah, I tried to fit in as much as possible because I didn't want to feel like an outsider, even though it was pretty obvious that I was there, that I was different. Yeah, but I think it wasn't until towards the end that I was just more so okay, as much as I feel like I'm a part of everyone, I felt like I was just trying to be someone else to fit in. And so towards grade 11 and 12, I think that's when I realized, okay, I need to be more myself and hope that everyone was just more accepting of me. So yeah, yeah, that's a memory. There's a lot more.
Do you think that time in high school helped shape who you are today?
Yeah, it did. I guess in terms of being more open in understanding cultural issues. When I realized how little people knew about what was happening in the world, it kind of just motivated me to do my course and be more engaged into understanding different types of people and understanding different perspectives. So it did shape me in the fact that challenging my own ideas at that stage led me into becoming more aware of other issues that were happening within my own communities or other communities that are similar to me. Yeah.
And what about you, Jill? How do you think your time at Hallows helped drive your desire for social justice?
I think it definitely did. Sister Anne played a large role in that. I think as well, I was very fortunate with the people that many of you are here today that I went to school with. I think all Hallows engendered a sense of sisterhood actually in me, being one of four sisters. It sort of came naturally as well, I suppose. But I think as well, just the idea of social justice was ingrained in me in a very young age, to look out for those who felt marginalised or excluded. And that's really filtered down in the way that I orientate myself towards work, I suppose. That I'm always working with the least marginalised or the least, the most vulnerable. And so, yeah, I think it was very fundamental to who I am today, I would say. And I'm just thinking, we underestimate it, and because Dorcas and I have had a few conversations now about this, about that someone can look okay from the outside and look like they're functioning, but actually it might be very difficult for them to really feel part of the community. And to, you always do feel a little bit on the margins and a little bit vulnerable, I suppose, because of that. And the need that we have to be part of a tribe, to be able to identify with people that we're, the community that we're part of. And I think, I've seen this in many different situations in work as well. I'm just thinking in Kosovo, I used to go into these Serbian enclaves, and because there was conflict between the Kosovo Albanians and Kosovo Serbians. And they were very distrusting of me at first, but as I went and started to spend some time there with these people who were really marginalised and frightened for their security, with an openness of heart as well, with I suppose an approach of non-judgment, which I think, it's part of what the Hallows instilled in me. It really opened things up and allowed them to start sharing information with me that was crucial to be able to solve cases of people who were missing. So it was fundamental.
And bringing us into the present day, we of course have a daughter in Year 10 at All Hallows at the moment. How do you juggle the family and your extremely challenging work, and what sort of challenges does that present?
Well, my friends all know about this. Quite a number of challenges. It's not very easy, and hasn't been the last few years. My kids are sick and tired of being dragged around the world. And I think it's, we've had many times of being quite distant, quite far apart. We had a particularly challenging time of about 18 months that we were separated from each other when they were here and I was over in Geneva and Cyprus. And the cruel irony when your daughter says, "Mum, I noticed that you're helping to keep families together, but ours are split apart." She really knows how to drive it home. And then when she came to join me in Geneva, and I was working ridiculous hours, and she said, "Mum, just to remind you that I've come all the way over here when I didn't want to for you, and I don't see anything of you." So I think it's been very tough. She didn't ever want to go to Switzerland, as most teenagers don't. You want the assurance and the certainty of where you live and your friends. So I think it's been particularly difficult for her now, just coming back to All Hallows, and she's changed from the experience, as she does every time she goes away. And so it's very difficult to translate the experiences that you've had with people that you've previously been friends with. So I think, at that age, your identity is put into question anyway, and I think hers is doubly put into question. She'd kill me if she knew I was talking about it.
With this year's International Women's Day theme, Choose to Challenge in mind, obviously you're choosing to challenge inequality. Why is it so important to do that?
I think inequality and marginalisation are anathema to me. I can't bear to watch it. And, I see particularly, if we bring it back to women and the role that women play, I mean, they're so incredibly strong, and for me, being quite privileged, in a privileged position where I have access to governments, where there are a lot of women who face incredible inequalities. We were talking also about what your mum probably went through when she was escaping. I mean, women who are separated from their husbands or their partners are very open to sexual violence, to unwanted approaches from men. The children, if they've got lots of concerns about their female children and about the same happening to them, they have to find a way to earn the money, find a livelihood. How am I going to feed my kids? What does it mean for their education? So I think, for me to watch it, these people don't have a choice. There is no choice for them. This is their life. So I find that for me, I can choose to challenge that, and I have access to be able to do that, to be like a port parole, I suppose.
It was interesting what you mentioned before about women being the unofficial keepers of history. What have you learned about the role of women, particularly in those complex situations that you've worked in?
I think that women, what's surprising to me is that we have this idea of women as being victims, but that's actually a flawed idea. They carry many different identities. They can be a victim, they can be a perpetrator, they can be a soldier, they can be a peacemaker. So I think that what this has actually taught me is to see that in war, it's all grey. There's no black and white, there's no right and wrong, there's no justice. And actually the idea of doing justice is not the same as undoing injustice. And I think about some of the women, particularly when I was in Argentina and talking to women whose partners and husbands had been disappeared by the military in the 70s. And when I talked to them, what does justice mean for you? And they'd say that my loved one had never gone missing, that they'd never disappeared in the first place. So even though in a society where actually perpetrators are going to jail, it doesn't mean that their loved one's ever going to come back. So I think it's for us as well to realise that even when there is justice, it's the person who is left with the crime or the war or the trauma relives that every day. And I think we've all heard probably Grace Tame talk about this. And for survivors of trauma and sexual violence, they need, and particularly I could very much relate to it, seeing what women do in my work, they repeat the name of their loved one all the time. The name is really important because they were tried, that their name was, an attempt was made to erase their name from history. So by these women reclaiming the name and talking about their experience and repeating the story, even though it's exhausting and it re-traumatises them every moment of every day, they do that so that society won't forget. They do that because they feel they have a duty to remember their loved one and to educate the next generation about the trauma and so it doesn't happen again. So I think that these are the things that I perceive and that I see that women play an incredibly strong, powerful, but often unacknowledged role in keeping families together, in keeping memory alive of trauma and atrocities, and that they're incredible peacemakers as well at the end of all of that.
That's really interesting. Dorcas, can you tell us about a time when you have had to choose to challenge circumstances or the way things are?
Yeah. There's been several instances where I had to. My recent one was choosing to move out of my home with my parents. That was mostly a challenge because of our cultural beliefs, which is pretty much that women only move out when they're getting married. But I think there was a lot of misunderstandings with me and my family because I do have 4 brothers and they're overly protective. It was very hard to negotiate with them and try to set boundaries with them. So I think for me, I just didn't want any arguments with my family, and I thought that my relationship with them would be much better if I moved down. So I think that was a challenge because no one does no many people from my country move out unmarried. And it was a lot of talk in the community as well, about what I would be doing, but yeah, I think I don't know, I've just grown so much from it. Obviously it's sad some of my family don't talk to me, but I've learned so much. I've learned to be very dependent, and it just made me realize how much more I can be doing with my life rather than just staying at home and obeying rules. And it's just given me confidence to really be challenging other instances where I feel people are trying to put me down, or just even seeing a marginalized group go through something horrible, it's just made me more stronger to, focus on my goals and my future. Yeah.
I can just bounce off what you're saying, Dorcas, because I think you've shown incredible resilience, and it's underestimated as well what Dorcas went through, with your mum, with your family being separated. Then when that happens, everyone assumes new roles, and I think you were saying as well that your brother assumed the role of the father, being your protector as well, and that's a role he's not been willing to give up, even though your dad's come back.
Yeah.
But I think as well, when the separation happens, roles do change within families, expectations do change. So even though you did have a happy ending in that your family all made it here, your partner joined you, it's not been easy because on top of assimilation into a new country, culture, language, way of being, you've also had to deal with your family having to renegotiate those roles that had already changed. So I think, we have this idea of happy ending, but it's not always the case. And I think, you described it's really heartbreaking, but also it's actually what happens most of the time.
And on that note, Dorcas, why was it so important for you to challenge what your family's expectations of you were?
I think for me, I just saw it as an intergenerational thing that would carry on, and because it's not really a conversation that's had, like my community, we don't really talk about our problem, and so I try to talk to my mum, and when I saw that we weren't on the same page, I don't know, it was I just need to see what life is like outside of being restrained in an environment where I have to do as I'm told. Because for her, that type of being a woman, staying at home, that's how she had to survive her way in life. Because she even told me when she was in refugee camps during the war, she had to be very demure and not stand out so she wouldn't be a target. So I understand her perspective in that sense, but I think for me coming to Australia, I realised that if I wanted to have something or jobs and getting into places, I really needed to advocate for myself and I needed to put myself out there. So yeah, I chose to challenge that idea because I knew that the way I was thinking worked more for the environment that I was raised in and the environment that essentially I'd be staying in for a while. So yeah.
And you're now studying nursing and behavioural science. Can you tell us what led you to that? What are your goals?
So I'm doing nursing. I don't know, I wanted to do psychology fully, but for 5 years of study, that's a lot. In a row, no. So I just did the double degree with nursing because I wanted to have some work in between, studying and going back. And for me, the choice to do behavioural sciences, it was more so that I noticed within my community, there isn't a lot of talk about mental health. The way it's perceived is if you, if you experience something, or it's just temporary, or it's sadness. And I've had a lot of conversations with, my peers and some of the older parents. And I've come to notice that what they're describing are psychological symptoms of a mental disorder, but it's just something that they're just not recognizing as a problem. So I just decided to study that and try to normalize it within my own community. In terms of goals, I would love to be a clinical psychologist and work with some of the youth because the older parents, it's just not getting there. They're still not understanding that concept because I think they just have to deal with it and just push it by and go through life. But that's my goal. Yeah.
I just have a couple of quick questions to finish up on. Jill, what about a person or a book who's inspired you?
Well, I think that there's no one person, I suppose. It's countless women that I meet all the time are really inspirational and such a leveler to me to not sweat the big stuff or the small stuff and see the big picture. And I think that there's one, again, it's my Bonnie, my bonbon, who always shows me the way of life. And I remember it was in Argentina and I went to interview a mother who'd lost her young son during the dictatorship. And Bonnie was 3 at the time. And we were sitting around a big table and she very uncharacteristically got off my lap and went round and sat in the lap of the woman who she didn't know and who I was going to interview. And she sat in the lap and she had her comforter, finger in her mouth, and just sat back into the woman, and the woman I just saw didn't know what to do, and I just nodded at her. And she started to hold Bonnie really tightly, and it was like Bonnie was her son that she didn't know what had happened to. And it was after that we left, and Bonnie said to me, "Mum, I feel so lonely." And it made me realise then that in some strange way, Bonnie had picked up on the emotion of the woman and what had gone on at the age of 3. And I thought, oh my goodness, this woman lives with this every day. I can't even imagine if it's my worst nightmare that my children would just disappear and into thin space. So I think every day, for me, it's the women who wake up every morning and face the day and go on with the day, that actually remember the person that's missing all the time, even though they might be under a lot of pressure from their own families. To let go and to accept that, your son's dead. For communities who say he's dead, he's not coming back. And the women who are so loyal, who every year of a person's life, their children's life, will buy an outfit or more outfits and put it in the wardrobe. And you can see in the wardrobe it goes from baby sizes all the way up to 30-year-old adult sizes. So it's probably those sorts of people that really inspire me to keep going.
What about you, Dorcas? Anyone in particular who inspires you?
There's a lot of people. I'm mostly inspired by, same thing, women like just choosing to challenge injustice and like trying to find a way in society and have a seat at the table, which there's plenty of you here. But mostly, like, this is gonna sound strange, but Beyonce. Exactly. I just think, like, I've actually watched like more like documentaries of her, and I just think her work ethic like is amazing, and she is like an African American woman, and there's so many firsts like she's won, and so many places like she's sat at that she wouldn't be invited to. So, and it all just comes down to like her work ethic and just being able to like not have having maybe I can do anything I want, if I really put my mind to it. So I don't know, like just watching her and how she carries herself, like that really does motivate me to have that fierce fire and just like own through my work in and believe that I can do anything I want.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dorcas and Jill. It was fascinating to hear your stories, Jill, about your absolutely selfless work. Dorcas, I have no doubts you'll be an absolutely amazing nurse and psychologist if that's what you choose to do. Can you please give them a round?